Okay, everyone, let's get started. Welcome to the third instalment of Agile London. Had some great feedback on the previous two so far. And as I've said, I'm going to continue to facilitate these through lockdown. We've got them every Wednesday, many speakers booked in. So just as a reminder, if you do want to speak or want to get involved, just message me on LinkedIn. Name's Alex Scriven, and we'll get you involved. So to get started, got two great speakers tonight. Got Dhaval Shah up first and Jon Spruce up second. Let them introduce themselves, but Dhaval's talk is collaborating, learning and staying healthy in a remote environment. So Dhaval, I'll hand over to you. Can I just say before we go on though, please make sure you are on mute, and if you want to ask any questions, please message me privately in the chat at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and I will ask them at the end. I've just noticed it sort of increases fluidity a lot more if the questions are asked to me via the chat, and I'll ask them at the end. So, Dhaval, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. You see my screen?
We can see that. Yep.
All right.
All good.
I'm just going to make it slightly bigger. So thank you everyone for coming to this talk tonight. I want to express a couple of things before I kick off into the materials. So I just want to make sure everyone feels good and safe and happy. I appreciate this is a very different time that we're all living in, and certainly I've undergone a lot of learnings and a lot of reflections over the last 6 to 7 weeks. So this talk is really a reflection of that. It's really a reflection of some of the things that I've discovered, some of the things I wish I knew previously. This is a new normal for us right now. And the main emphasis on this talk is really about staying healthy. So we are working in a very different environment that we're used to. Typically, I think everyone can relate to the fact that whilst they might have had some experience of working in a remote environment previously, that the very nature of what we're living through is incredibly different, and that's okay. It's okay to acknowledge and okay to recognize that things are slightly different to what we might experience or know to be true. And what I want to cover in the next 15 to 20 minutes is some of those learnings. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail around lots of things. I really reflected deeply around what might be some key things to take away. And I'd love to share them with you because I think there's some very tangible benefit to sharing it. And also I think there's some beauty acknowledging more of the human side around what we're working around. So we all come from an Agile practitioner background, and we're au fait with those concepts around how we work in terms of process mechanics per se. I'm more coming at this from an individual people and team perspective, and I think that for me has really stood out in some of the things that I've learned over the last 6 to 7 weeks. So I just wanted to open up with a bit of background in terms of my experience. So when Alex asked how I'd like to be introduced to the group here, I said, honestly, I'm absolutely fine with whatever that introduction is. I don't have an attachment to a particular label or title or anything of that nature. I think what I would express is that I've been in industry for close to 15 years. I've worked across a number of different industry verticals, very varied background. I started off as a full stack developer at Deloitte Digital, did some internship prior to that and at some very big institutions, and then evolved over time into doing team lead type stuff, Scrum Mastery type stuff, and eventually go into the Agile coaching space, for want of a better phrase. So where I am right now is I am an interim client services director at Method. So Method is a design agency. In terms of the work that I'm doing, I can't really share that because that's under NDA. What I can say is that I'm leading a piece of work in the very early stages for a very, very high profile client. And that piece of work involves connecting and collaborating with individuals within the UK, with a team in the Ukraine, and with the client who are based in the US and Canada. So that's the broad strokes of the type of work that I'm engaged in. In terms of what it covers on a day-to-day basis, it's a mixture of things. It's dependent on the needs of the team, but it can generally be something amongst remote facilitation, coaching, mentoring, collaboration, getting things done, having discussions with a whole range of teams around design, data, engineering. And I can truly say that I'm really enjoying the experience, although I wish it was actually in person as opposed to being physically remote, because I really enjoy that collaboration with individuals. And I really love being in the physical space as other people, as I've come to discover over the last couple of months. So I'll give you a bit of context as to why I'm going to talk about the things I'm talking about, because I think that's useful to bring to bear. So I'll provide a picture of a scenario for you. It's March 16th, 2020. So I've lost track of time, but I think it's 6 or 7 weeks in the past. I've started off with a new team. I've met most of them in person. It's an unfamiliar context. We're doing a design thinking piece, which then leads into some tangible deliveries. And I'm working with a team who is unfamiliar with Agile values and principles, and I'm getting them up to speed of how I'd like to run things, how I'd like to lead things, and kind of guide them on that basis. So I'm really there to kind of stamp my authority, give them really strong direction, leadership in terms of, all right, great, we've got this awesome problem to solve. Here's how I'd like us to solve it, and here's how I intend we collaborate and work together to solve these things for a really high profile and valuable client of ours. We get to the end of March 16th. We've had a couple of emerging details coming from the previous week. So the first thing that changed was that the client wasn't able to travel. So in the first week, we were supposed to have a 3-day collaborative workshop with our client who are based in San Francisco and Toronto. Late on, I think it was Friday the 13th of March, travel plans got cancelled. We suddenly had to pivot, and instead of running a 3-day workshop in person, we had to quickly pivot and run a 3-day workshop remotely in Miro, tools of that nature. On March 16th, the studio that I was working in shut down, and it is still shut down. So my first day in the office is also my last day in the office. And that set the tone and precedent for the things that unfolded in the coming weeks and months. And it's been a real challenge, actually. I think I'd love to be honest and express that there were lots of things I thought were true around how we do interaction, how we do collaboration, how we work. So my Agile practice and experience spans almost the entirety of my career. And I've certainly developed some truisms, some idioms around how I think things should be. And they've been really tested and stretched as part of working in a very different way with an audience who isn't necessarily familiar with stylistically how we work and what we do in terms of bringing these Agile values and principles to bear. So on that premise, I'd like to share 5 key things around what I've learned, and I'd invite you to think about these things as I'm talking through them, and really think about what they mean to you as I'm articulating these things in more detail, and think about some questions you may have towards the end of the session today. So, lesson number 1, or learning number 1, mistakes will happen, and that's okay. So one of the things that I have a really strong aspects of pride around is that I hold myself to very high standards. I've been reasonably successful in my career. I've worked across a broad range of industries. I've done some what I hope to consider to be some really good things in my career in terms of moving clients forward, both personally and professionally. One of the things I discovered is that on this engagement, there's been balls dropped, plates smashed, things of that nature. And it's been a real eye-opener for me in terms of accepting that things will happen that necessarily are either within our control or outside of control, and begin to let go of actually the aspect that you can't control everything because you can't see everything in front of you. And I think part of this for me was around the test of my ego. So letting go of the things that I thought should be functional and workable from a day-to-day perspective, but instead of actually come across as, well, actually, this thing that I expected to be at this level of quality is coming across at this level of quality. Things like that, which I kind of anticipated and expected, they weren't happening. And what I learned throughout this process is that actually things like this will happen. So we will have missed conversations. We will miss nuances of how someone is feeling over a remote call. They might not have their camera switched on, or even if they do, you can't get the full gist of their body language. When you're working with teams whose mother tongue isn't English, and it's maybe their second or third language, they may not necessarily be able to fully understand what you're saying, and they may feel a sense of nervousness around actually expressing that with you, because the relationships that you would like to have formed, that you would have formed in person, simply haven't developed. And so I think a key thing around what I've learned is actually acknowledging that mistakes will happen, and recognizing and letting other people know around you that mistakes will happen, and actually it's all right. It's actually how we respond to those mistakes and how we learn from those things, I think, is really, really key. It's the resilience aspect. If we bring back to some things which are maybe more familiar from a kind of an engineering or agile perspective, it's around when a server goes down, it's not so much, well, how many times that server going down, it's more around the resilience. How quickly does it come back up? And so I think the key thing around this is resilience, and recognizing that there's opportunities for learning and growth as we discover new things and as we make mistakes along the way. A second key learning for me is that the more I've learned over my career, actually the less I know. It might sound paradoxical, but here's a really tangible and practical example. Like, I've been running daily scrums in a particular way for a number of years. I typically like to walk the board, like to go right to left. I like to line it around outcomes or goals or pieces of work. That doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And actually, one of the key things we've changed in terms of how we work as a team is that we open up our daily scrums with just 5 minutes of asking how everyone is. We check in. We explore our emotions, we get a sense of how people are feeling, and then we emerge and go into the work itself. Then we do daily planning. We don't call it a daily scrum, we call it a daily sync. And actually, as we start to learn how we can structure the process around the needs of individuals, one of the things I've really let go of is adhering to any type of methodology or framework or process that you could subscribe or ascribe to. What I've gone back to, from my perspective, is first principles. So can we co-create? Can we collaborate? Can we co-evolve over time? Can we take people on the journey? Can we get early feedback into our work? And what's been really refreshing for me is to deviate away from having to explain what Scrum does or what a key element of Kanban is or how we do a certain thing, and just talk about things on a very general high level, and really actually test my own understanding around how well I know these concepts. Because actually, if you're talking to individuals who aren't familiar with the Agile values and principles, and you don't have an opportunity to educate or teach them what these things mean, and actually you just have to get on with the work itself because you have client deadlines and you have commitments that you need to meet, it's actually really refreshing to just say, yeah, here's how I'd like to work. Can we explore this? How does that feel? And learn and iterate as we go along. So it's been really refreshing to say, okay, there's always things I can bring to bear, but actually in this context, that may not mean that much to you. So rather than hammer on about it, let's just get cracking. Let's start from somewhere. Let's evolve really quickly over time, and let's learn. Let's learn together, and let's do that in a really intentional, meaningful way. So that's my second learning. Learning 3. Zoom out, be curious. So when you are leading a team, I suspect there may be some mixed feelings around whether we have leaders in teams, especially from an Agile perspective, given we talk about the notion of servant leadership. In this particular context, so when we talk about leading a team, I am responsible for looking after a number of disciplines. So design, data, engineering, architecture, bringing all these things together to converge And this is really important to relate to from a design perspective, because the first part of a design thinking process is really understand the problem to be solved. So you're in the problem space, and then as you get some more clarity around what the problem to be solved is and the opportunity that you can embark on to deliver a tangible need to your user or customer, then you converge and start to figure out what it is you're going to do to kind of take next steps to satisfying that customer or user need. As part of that process, you can actually get really close to the work itself. And in some senses, that's really good. It means you can get a level of detail, a level of appreciation for what's going on. In some senses, they can actually be really challenging because you can get so invested and caught up in the work itself that you begin to lose sense of what you're trying to achieve more generally. And so one of the things I've reflected on quite deeply over the last couple of weeks is actually sometimes just taking a breath, stepping out for a moment, and checking in both with myself and the wider team around what is it we're trying to achieve. What is the purpose of our work? Where are we in relation to that? And if there's misalignment around that, what can we do to bring things back in on track? And if we can bring some of this thinking to bear, if we can begin to encourage conversations of this nature on a more frequent basis, it starts to open up a number of different possibilities. A really practical example of this is we had a presentation Monday evening to a very senior audience from the client, and we're stepping them through the presentation. It was going really well. So myself and design lead were talking them through, okay, here's what we've discovered. Here's what we think the problem to be solved is. Here's what we think the opportunity is. And then there was a tangible drop, pause, and then quite a sharp response in terms of, actually, I'm no wiser as to what we're doing next, and I would appreciate seeing a bit more around what the next steps were. Now, had we taken a step back and preempted some of the questions that may have come from the client, we could have actually responded to that much more, I think, impactfully than we actually did. So in terms of the working for the next steps, which is taking the biggest problem to be solved, breaking it down into epics, features, stories, things of that nature, and then start to work out how we're going to build against that, we didn't actually include any of that thinking in our presentation. We didn't even include it in the appendix because it wasn't validated by the client. So we have more direct relationship with someone we're working on with a day-to-day basis, but the client didn't know that. And actually, had we taken a step back, had I taken a step back and said, actually, this individual, person A, if I'd preempted some of what person A might have been looking for and incorporated that into the materials, even if it was in the appendix, it would really have enabled us to cleanly progress to the next stage of the conversation in a way that would have given them comfort, instead of me having to provide a voiceover around what the next steps were. And so I've taken some real sharp learnings from that and said, okay, right, here's what we've discovered. How can we start to apply this going forward to make sure that when we have our next interaction with the client, that we're actually being proactive in terms of our thinking? Can we stress test some of our thinking? Can we stress test some of our plans? Can we check in with the client either directly or indirectly to make sure that the direction travel we're going in is the right one? And actually, you had a really good conversation with the client yesterday. He said, yep, actually, you can get a conversation with person A next week, 30 minutes. I've just seen something going in the diary for next Thursday. So that's awesome. Taking that learning in, immediately acted on it. And we're using this thinking now going forward over the next 5 to 6 weeks to make sure that as we're emerging the work, as we're getting closer to bringing our proposition to bear, really selling the vision to the client around what the art of the possible could be if we were to proceed for the next phase of work, that we're covering more of the bases than we were previously. So that's the third learning. Learning 4, relationships is more important than the work itself. So I am not ashamed to admit that I used to be quite driven in nature in terms of focusing after goals, outcomes, etc., etc. In fact, a large part of my language over the last 5 years has been very much oriented towards that. So I've spent a lot of time in the IT side and also a lot of time in the business and finance side, working with different types of clients, trying to engage with them on their terms to actually bring more cohesive conversations across different types of people to align around what we're trying to achieve. And so the whole notion around business agility, outcome-oriented thinking, being goal-driven, those are some of the things I've really stressed. And I feel as part of that, I perhaps lost an element around what's really important, what really actually enables that, which is the people doing the work itself. And one of the things I really keenly focus on as part of my work over the last 6 or 7 weeks has not been so much focused around the work itself, because actually the team that I have the privilege of leading is incredibly talented. You've got some absolutely outstanding individuals, and together they work really, really effectively, and they have a huge amount of innate talent and experience. And what I've spent a huge amount of my time doing and fostering, or what I've been trying to foster, is building really strong cohesive relationships between those individuals, becoming what we call a real team. So I'm not going to show you any diagrams around how this relates to in practice or in theory. There's stuff in the wider literature you can access. There's a model, the team performance curve by Katzenbach and Smith that you can refer to, which I wasn't included originally, but I thought, actually, no, that's not really what I want to convey. I just want to talk about more of the individuals itself. And I think if I kind of riff on that a bit more and express how we've had to really focus on that in this environment, it's really making time for people to express how they feel. So running really impactful retrospectives, stepping people through that process, giving people space to express how they feel, giving people space to feel not great. Because in this environment that we're working in, things are difficult, things are challenging, and emotionally, we might be at different stages at various points during the day. And over time, what we've discovered is that as people have come closer together, the quality of the work itself has increased drastically. And so by virtue of focusing on the relationships, or by virtue of focusing on the interactions between individuals, the work takes care of itself. And actually it's going back to the notion that we are a collection of individuals coming together as a team, looking out for each other. That has been so important to how we've delivered what we've delivered in the last 6 or 7 weeks that it's one of my biggest learnings, actually. I think it's really important to express that and actually just reflect and say, actually, this is super important, and this is what I'd love you to take away. And I saved the best till last, and this is my 5th and final learning. And this is where I think there's been the most insight for me, and also a bit of a growth journey, both personally and professionally. I think it's something that perhaps all of you can relate to, because it's the essence of who we are as individuals. So there have been times during the last 6 or 7 weeks where things have gone pretty badly. There have been times where I felt like I've lost control, times where I felt like things have been spiraling. And that's absolutely okay. If I reflect on the first 4 points, yeah, that's to be expected. What I did around week 3 or 4 of the engagement, as I said, actually, this can't continue, because if I'm gonna provide leadership to others, I need to figure out who I am in relation to this. I need to figure out who I want to be. I need to go back to what my principles are and make sure I'm expressing them clearly. And ultimately, all of this is a choice. Who you want to be in relation to others is something you get to dictate and choose. And what I've gone and done consistently, I consistently check in around this day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, is I go back, look at my principles that I hold to be true, and simply ask myself the question, who do I want to be in relation to that? How do I want to be in terms of demonstrating leadership, in terms of demonstrating servant leadership, in providing congruence, in providing real support to others? If I say I'm going to do something, am I actually delivering and doing against that? And in almost all cases, I am. But it was an evolution for me to really go back and say to myself, yeah, I'm not going to be this person anymore, because that's not the best version of me. I'm going to be this, and I'm going to do everything I can to hold true to this, because this is how I can impact others in the best way possible and give them the best environment they can be their best selves. And if I can do that, then everything else takes care of itself. So those are my 5 learnings. I invite you to reflect on what those mean to be true to you. And aside from that, just want to thank you for your time. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dhaval. Thought that was great, and can relate across sort of many platforms. So I really enjoyed that. Questions at the end, guys, to Dhaval and Jon, but I'm now going to hand you over to Jon Spruce. His talk is Pivoting in a Pandemic, How We Moved Our Agile Training Business to Online Delivery. Jon, over to you.
Thank you very much. Standard check, can anyone hear me? Just to make sure. How many times have you heard that this week? Right, okay, so I'm going to share a quick presentation and take you guys through what we have. So just make sure that you can see that. Can everyone see my full screen? I'm looking for a thumbs up.
Yep, can see that.
Cool. So, well, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about what we've discovered during this sort of this crazy time that we're in at the moment, and how we kind of moved Agile Center towards online and remote delivery, as well as pivoting some of our products into a different sort of world as well, really, to allow for on-demand delivery as well. So hopefully this should work. Quick introduction. I'm Jon Spruce. I'm an enterprise Agile coach and trainer. I've worked in many different industries, same as Dhaval, really. We've kind of worked in a number of these places together as well. My kind of industry sectors span from the military and even the government, all the way through to large banks and financial institutes and companies like Nike and Beats by Dre. I collect certificates, as you can see, but more likely to validate kind of the learning and do some of the training that we do. I'm also an open water swimmer when I'm allowed outside. That's me swimming in North Wales, where I generally live. It's quite cold, but I tend to enjoy it for some bizarre reason. I'm also a dad, and I'm also a husband as well. That's my daughter Darcy and my wife Becky. And we've all been under the kind of huge strain with this this craziness, and we're trying to get ourselves through it all. So I'm going to focus more on the business side of things, and I want to just sort of take you through briefly what the case for sort of business agility is in the first place before we sort of look at what that means for how we change as an organization. So a couple of things, you may have seen these type of things in the past, but I'm going to just sort of refresh your memory on these. The case for business agility, really, innovations are gaining traction faster than ever. Things like the telephone took about 75 years to reach 50 million users. Angry Birds took about 35 days. And I think Pokemon Go took about 14 days to get to that level. So innovation gets traction very, very quickly in the market, and unicorns can grow faster than ever as well. Fortune 500 companies used to take 20 years to hit that $1 billion cap. Oculus Rift hit it in 14 months. So innovation is improving, technology is improving, you can grow your organizations very quickly. However, if you don't continually innovate, you'll face extinction. In 1960, the average company had about 61-year lifespan. It's now about 15 years, if you're lucky. And so you need to be able to build your organization around business agility and be able to pivot to the market demands. And of course, we have a generation like no other here with this particular pandemic we're facing into. Nothing's really been like this before, and I think it's going to make a big difference to how people work in the future. The problem is that a lot of the larger companies are moving far too slow with this. The 60 original Fortune 500 companies now sort of only 60 of them really exist, and 52% disappeared in the last 15 years. So large organizations that we've worked in, sort of large banking organizations, they are starting to shift, but when you're 300 years old and you have lots and lots of legacy and hierarchy in place, it's really difficult to pivot and move your business in a good way. There's a lot of good stuff happening though, but sometimes it's a bit too slow. I think there's maybe a world market for maybe 5 computers. There's a quote from Thomas Watson, IBM president, 1943. I've probably got more than 5 computers on my desk with my iPad, my phone, my laptop, etc. It's just the fact that the exponential rate of change is huge, as well as the technological advances. And I think the learning from all of this is the fact that if you don't innovate and you don't pivot into the market changing around you, even before this pandemic, this stuff was very important, but even more important now, how do you shift into it? And I think one of the things is that Agile Center itself, we're a training and consulting and coaching organization. And of course, when all your clients start saying that they don't want to have anybody on site, this is at the beginning of the pandemic, and then actually nobody going on site. We suddenly saw our public courses tank. We suddenly saw our private courses being sort of revoked. And we looked at how we can sort of try and respond to change. I think, you know, we would potentially call this an extinction event. similar to the sort of dinosaurs, really, a corporate extinction event, may I call it, if we're talking from the business side. For example, you can see here just some nice graphs from Bloomberg and BBC as well. Dow and FTSE saw the biggest quarterly drops in the first 3 months of the year, and oil prices for Western Texas Intermediate dropped below negative for the first time ever. So it's a massive impact to the economy, massive impact to business, and you need to be able to pivot and move your organization with it. Luckily, we're an agile company and we live our values, as you'd expect. And we sort of changed the way that we would do these things. We looked at the stuff that we would try and approach to try and help ourselves move forward. So one of our core offerings is certified training, Scrum Alliance certified training. We CSM, ACSM, CSP, those kind of projects and those kind of deliveries, those CAL as well. We deliver those things in classrooms, generally speaking, and they work really well, you know, in classrooms. But however, the delivery mechanism when you move to online is very different. People engage differently. People are getting Zoom fatigue already because of being on calls all day, as Dhaval mentioned before. And so you have to sort of organize and design your products in a way that allows for that to happen. So people learn differently online. There's a safety issue there. People are looking into a camera. We've got 30 or so people on the call and maybe 4 people on the cameras. So people kind of generally kind of keep themselves away from that. It's difficult to sort of do that. There's a fight or flight response to being on a camera. Psychologically, it can make you feel quite kind of exposed, really. So what we want to try and do is allow for smaller learnings using sort of things like breakout rooms, etc. Zoom has that facility. You can try and work with MS Teams to make that work as well. We've found a couple of ways of doing that with some of our clients. We've had to allow for more regular breaks to allow people to do it. What a really interesting thing, though, is actually it's easier to get people back into a training room online than it is in person. Of course, if you have a timer going off that says you need to be back in 5 minutes from a coffee break or what have you, when you're in a training room, you have to go out and herd the cats. You're often out of the room trying to get people back in and start training again. But actually, we're finding that people are more responsive and more sticking to the time boxes, which is interesting. We're also looking at shortening down the duration of the courses. So instead of it being a 2-day slog of Zoom, spreading them out across 3 or 4 days so that people have got both the breaking activity of looking after the kids or taking their share of the chores or what have you in the morning and then doing the training in the afternoon. And although it trains out a little bit longer, the actual delivery is the same. And what we're finding is that people are enjoying that a lot more because it gives them that kind of balance. And so we're sort of playing with the length of time, sometimes 4 days, sometimes 3, and it's kind of working quite well. The breakout rooms we're finding the most important thing, really, because we do table-based activities and interactive games. But what we're finding is that if you get yourself out in a breakout room, people can converse and sort of talk to each other. What we're finding in the main room is that people are very kind of stony silent, put themselves on mute and really kind of just listening to you. So it's a difficult thing to sort of manage. One of the things we've also found is reading people's body language within the kind of course is quite difficult as well. And you'd normally get that in the room, is get a tacit feeling for how things are going. And you've not really got that in there. So you've got to translate that training from the classroom into sort of online, really. And some of the things that we've mentioned here is about how you set your space up, really. This is Kareem, one of our trainers, and one of the founding partners of Agile Centre alongside John and myself. You may get a separate mic, it's generally okay. I've got one set up on this kind of setup here and a high quality camera. You can use your laptops, but actually you find there's a better presentation if you have better equipment with what you can. Get a light box. We've got a soft box in this particular room here, which will help kind of illuminate the picture and give you a little bit of a base there. And internet connection is key, making sure you've got a decent, solid connection for when you're delivering long-term kind of training. Multiple screens is important. I've got 3 in front of me here at the moment. I've got my laptop. I've got the Zoom call up on this side here with a timer telling me how far I'm going. And I've also got my keynote up on the far right here as well, which is full screen. Quite interestingly, the keynote you're seeing on screen at the moment is actually exported to HTML. So what I did in Keynote, I exported out as a HTML presentation, and I can now run that full screen inside a browser window and still have all my other windows and all my other screens working. Because what we found is when you actually run full screen on Zoom, things basically, that the presentation takes over everything and you can't see anything on the screen. So we found that that's quite an interesting takeaway. Now, you may not all have a spare office like I have, or the spare room in the bottom of the garden that Kareem's built. So you can still work with what you have. This is John's setup. There's a bit of a light around each side of the screen and a small webcam there. Just make sure the space is there and kind of test it for different kind of reasons. There are different ways to set this up from a different kind of cost perspective. making sure the space is set up for you to achieve the best kind of delivery is really important. So do test and play about with different options there as well. Remote tools. We talked briefly before about Microsoft Teams. You can use Zoom. For example, Zoom has had a lot of security issues recently, or stuff in the press around that. So some of the clients are reacting by reducing that. So one of our clients currently, Zoom is classed as a virus according to their system and takes it off the laptops anybody's using. And so their preferred tool is Microsoft Teams, and you can use channels and chats to create breakout rooms to make Microsoft Teams work for you. And so you need some kind of remote tool to enable the actual delivery of the training, similar to what we're working on now with Zoom. Microsoft Teams can do it, Skype for Business, etc. Just sort of play with the different tools, look at the different things that are available, because it will make a big difference when it comes to working with a client who may be not able to use your particular setup, and you may be able to pivot again the way you work with it. We've worked with both Miro and Mural, which are whiteboarding kind of collaborative tools. We kind of leaned on Mural more than anything else because that actually seems to be the best for what we want to deliver with. So that's quite cool, and it works quite well. On the right-hand side there, you see there's a little video playing a minute ago of everybody kind of playing and moving teams around, moving cards around a team board, and everyone can see the same board, and everyone can see that inside the actual chat as well. And it really helps to kind of create that interactive feeling as well. So try and convert your courseware, your kind of materials and your presentation work into these kind of collaborative tools. And they're definitely very helpful as part of what we've seen. Again, test what works, because we found some organizations don't allow access to others, and we've got to sort of have these things in the bank. What I've also seen a couple of trainers doing currently as well is actually going more offline by going online. So actually by going online, they have a second camera set up, and it's pointing straight down, and they're using post-it notes, and they're drawing, and they're kind of creating different things, using kind of Bicklebow and all that kind of approach from drawing approach, but using a camera looking down on their stuff, a bit like an OHP from back in the old days. So there are different ways and different setup depending on your style, but I think the big thing here is to sort of test as much as possible. So that's some of our training kind of stuff from our certified training. We've run a public certified Agile leadership course, a certified Scrum Master and certified product owner. The courses ran last week and the week before, and we've had some great feedback on how they were ran. But don't underestimate the amount of work it takes to convert your work, your training into online delivery and to test it. It is a lot of work. And I think you need to sort of allow for time to look at how you can transpose it over. Of course, in our CSM, we would normally play with Lego. And so you can't do that online, how all the games are available to allow you to simulate backlogs and simulate product development and product building. And so we have alternatives that we're using, and they work quite well. So definitely look at how you can do that and spend some time really experimenting. What we've also done is run small sessions with people that we know to beta test our exercises and make sure everything connects and everything works up. The last thing you want to be doing is spending time on the day just trying to make sure everything works. Just on that one point, however, what we managed to do is start our trainings half an hour before we would normally start on the first day. So although we've sent out in our course joining instructions, these are the accounts you need to set up, these are the connections you need, these are the stuff you need to have, we'll have that half hour set up just for everyone to do the wave at the camera, the can you hear me, can you see me, can I connect, that kind of normal AV setup that most people who are doing the course probably haven't really done the prep work on. And so you give yourself a bit of leeway on the first day to ensure that everything's set up and run the first exercises to get people used to the tools. So that's where we got to our certified courses. I want to talk a little bit about something else we were doing at the same time. On our backlog, we had on-demand training. We were looking at actually building on-demand courses to live on places like Udemy, on lynda.com, those kind of places, and on LinkedIn. And we'd had that, we'd shot some film, well, way before the pandemic hit, really, when everyone was together, and we shot some assets for it, but it kind of lived on a backlog as we were transferring all of our, as the pandemic kind of took hold, we were transferring all our public courses to online and remote. What we did is we converted the Udemy course into a high priority item on our backlog and kind of let the other stuff drop down so that we could have another way of driving revenue, but also really just getting our stall out that we can deliver this type of stuff for both internal learning and development partners, but also for our other products as well. So brutal prioritization of what's important, and we kind of bumped that up the wall. So as the guys were transferring their courses over, I was busy producing a Udemy course in the background. So we had product development, we had one day of filming, and it was a brutal day. I would probably suggest that you do like a couple of days of filming, but even with this setup I have now, I could probably do a recording of a very similar kind of course, maybe on user stories, maybe on prioritization, maybe on leadership coaching. And you can record the filming, but actually the filming is actually quite a small amount of the overall kind of work that you have to do. We had a month of editing time, slicing and dicing all these films, probably about 60 or so individual films and then all got pieced together to basically create all the different sections within Udemy to create learning objectives and the summaries and the films and the quizzes. And there's actually a lot of work involved in that and the production of it. But we prioritized everything, hunkered down and got a whole team focused around it. The end results was a 2-hour on-demand video course. We've got about 5 or 6 course material downloads that we created as PDFs, Scrum guides, etc. And then in effect, we launched at the beginning of March, just as everything kind of went into lockdown and everything went a little bit crazy. And we used that as 2 months of continuous improvements. Here's Kareem getting fit with a mic, and here's our back office and how Premiere looks. And this is how it ultimately ended up looking as a kind of online course. This is one of our promo films we've got for the course. And this is the kind of stuff that we've seen working really well, because it's putting stuff out there really. And what we're trying to do is make sure that people can see that there are other products and other revenue streams available. And we've got other courses and other products that we're developing. So this is really just a high level introduction to Agile and Scrum, and it's really helpful. So what we've got in 2 months, we've had over 1,100 students sign up to it already. We've got in 47 different countries. There's loads of data in the back end of Udemy that gives you information on this. 24,763 minutes taught. And we've managed to keep quite a high star rating, about 4.3 stars, and that's across all those students that have been rating. So once you've got people using your course and you've got a high star rating, Udemy's algorithm pushes things up the listings to actually promote you more and more and get more and more people on it. But the revenue was only one aspect of this, and one of the big things here is more about it making a shop front for us as trainers to be able to offer this stuff to our customers in different ways. So what have we learned along the way? Okay, so there's a few things we've learned along the way. I was going to put the big pivot picture that Dhaval put in, but I've decided against it. I moved out before. But actually, evolution and innovation are key. Look at opportunities to leverage technology to evolve your products. We have classroom-based products that you whiteboard most of the time, and you spend all the time on post-it notes. And how can you make that an experience which is highly interactive and engaging online? Leverage the tools, look at the technology that can use it. One important thing as well is that we actually reduced the number of people that can come into a course as well. So we reduced it to a smaller number to get the initial test bed done, and that was enough to help us understand how far we can go with some of this stuff as well. Okay. Prioritize innovation for the new normal. So we were prioritizing a lot of other kind of fixes for our website and our other kind of BAU work, but we actually prioritize the innovative product, the new product that we were launching, so that the new normal is something that everyone can sort of access and work into. Connect and share. We're all in this together. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Our community is amazing for this stuff, and we should be sharing more and more. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. If we can keep on connecting and sharing on our learnings, it's going to only be better for everybody, really. And expect and adapt. Well, it's Agile, right? Perfect is the enemy of good. Launch something, test it, work it through, and see if there's any way you can come back. And the idea here is that you can evolve and move things forward, and you don't have to be you don't have to have the perfect setup to actually start working in this kind of way. I think it's important to know that you should start trialing and testing things early. So at least you know that you can then pick up and move with this stuff. So, shameless plug, of course, I'll show you some of the bits and pieces we've done. The actual course itself, I've got a code that runs until the 1st of May. You can get access to this. I'll share this deck after this presentation as well, but you can take a screenshot of this if you need to. Our actual introduction to Agile and Scrum is normally about 190 quid, I think. By average, it kind of sells between 13 and 15 pounds, but I've got a free course here that I'm giving you a code for this. You can take that. You can use it anytime you want, but you should claim it within the next sort of 2 days. It'll expire on the 1st of May, but the actual use you'll get lifetime access to. All that stuff I mentioned about the production we've done, the self-paced validated learning, the completion certificates, it's all really great stuff, and it's really helpful for people who are looking at a high-level introduction to Agile and Scrum. And also you can see the kind of work that goes behind that in the scenes as well. As far as the other courses we do, We've also put together a webinar code as well for this particular webinar called webinar-15. I'll give you 15% off any one of our courses. And we're running a few of them at the moment, which are online virtual courses. We've got the Certified Scrum Master that you may all have already had. If you don't, then there's access to that you can do with the Access Online Assessment. You've got the Certified Product Owner course as well, similar 2-day course, sometimes spread out over 3 or 4 days, sometimes on 2. Look at the website, see the dates that we're running at the moment for those things, and you get access to all the tools that you can use for all of this stuff as well. And if you're looking for more of an agile leadership approach, the kind of how you look at becoming a catalyst leader for your organization, how you look at the leadership agility kind of approach, and how you move from an exploit to an explore kind of organization as a different leader. This is the 2-day course. It's really immersive, really interesting to sort of work through. And it gives you lots of great models to start playing with and start using in your organization as well. Again, very difficult to transfer all this into online interactive, and we've had some really good feedback that we have already iterated on and already changed some of our course materials as well. Use that code, you get 15% off at the checkout on our secure website. So with that in mind, I've got a little bit of time left, maybe a minute to go to Q&A, but I think we're going to go to a group Q&A anyway, so I'll let Alex sort of host that. And that's my time. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to go to questions now if there's anything to do.
John, thank you very much. I thought that was great. Do get involved, guys, especially with the free one. Well worth signing up, and make sure you do it before the 1st of May. So I will go straight to questions now. First one to Dhaval. Would you not spec high availability?
Sorry, can I come in? That was regarding, I heard you mentioned about servers dropping and coming back up, etc. Okay, maybe I'm still thinking service delivery, maybe I was thinking sort of BAU and all the rest of it. But wouldn't it, even in the Agile world, even in the virtual world, wouldn't you spec multiple servers? Wouldn't you spec, say, multiple Oracle servers, each size for 75% of the load?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I think if we step back and look at the context that we're working, we're not machines. We're very much human, and so there's a bunch of prerequisites, a bunch of assumptions we come into an environment that we have, and none of these things are mapped out. It's an unknown terrain. We don't really have a compass. The compass we had, which was useful today, isn't useful tomorrow because can't something go outside my front door. And it's a recognition that things are very different, and we don't have necessarily a guide for this, and it's recognizing that actually, working a different way and being more accommodating is really useful.
Right. So, are you talking about people? Are you talking about service? Sorry, I came in partway. May have come in partway through. It was. Are you talking about service delivery? Were you talking about sort of your agile stuff, the sort of service delivery? What was it? Or are you talking about a development environment where, okay, servers don't have an X amount of uptime that they have to keep before you start burning SLA?
Right, okay, yeah. So my talk was centered around people interactions primarily. It wasn't necessarily talking about servers or development environments or things of that nature. So it's more around...
It's okay, sort of, because obviously I've been in so I've obviously, all my life, I'm not a dev. Yeah. So I'm thinking, when you hear stuff like that, I'm thinking, what, down shit, so that means we're burning SLA.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, I'll jump in on the next question there. To Dhaval again, are you experiencing any loss in productivity due to the lockdown?
That's a really interesting question. It's very difficult to know what the loss is because we don't have a benchmark. This is a very novel situation that we're working. I think the way I would answer that is that if I were able to go back in time and put in point some sort of measurement, then yes, it would be below where we would anticipate things to be, and that's okay. We've, as we've spoken to our client, we've been really authentic and honest around some of the challenges we're facing in terms of timelines and how we're feeling. And we've also learned and then adjusted as we've gone along. So we've made adjustments to how we're working. We, instead of necessarily doing all of the things collaboratively, highly connected, we're doing things such as making time for asynchronous work. So we may do a short activity together, 15 minutes, go off for 2 hours, come back. And that's actually one of the things we've learned that's actually works really well. So I think when it comes to productivity, that's quite a loaded term, particularly with our community. There's mixed feelings around what that means. In terms of the things we're delivering towards, like the kind of outcomes we're trying to engage with and the impacts we're trying to have, both from our own perspective, delivering really high quality work, and also have a meaningful engagement with our client, I think broadly speaking, we've been really successful, and I'm really proud actually of the team of how they've come together to enable that, because it's really been the cohesion of collaborating, working for each other, and building great relationships that's been a catalyst for this.
Fantastic. Okay, another question. I saw an article referring, this is to you again, Dhaval. I saw an article referring to Kanban used with service desks. It seems to push the complexity back to the user as opposed to being able to split a complex request out to individual issues against individual systems. Is Kanban and fix it first mutually exclusive?
I'm not sure I understand the question. It seems quite technical, and I'm not sure it's particularly related to the talk. So
no problem. We can move on. I've got a few to get through. So again, to you, Dhaval, you mentioned renaming your daily scrums to daily sync. Does that mean the name of your ceremonies has changed as a result of the pandemic?
So here's the thing around ceremonies, events, the labels we put on things. They're in some ways they're actually quite artificial. I feel that's my position. So I haven't introduced Scrum to the team. I haven't introduced any named framework or methodology. I invited the team to come up with a name that they thought made sense to them, because ultimately this is their experience I'm facilitating. So in terms of the nature of the activities or things that we cover, I think they turned out very similar in nature. So we do what is in effect, in essence, daily planning. We talk about the work, we identify what we need to move the work forward. We use visual planning to recognize where either people or subsets of the team are overloaded, or if we feel like we've got too much going on. But we use these activities to really facilitate a better quality of conversation. So I think the name is less important. It's the more the intention of how we use that activity to further our work, and then make sure that we're getting everything that we need from it. And if it's not working for the team, then what I find is that we frequently iterate, and we're doing that almost on a weekly basis, which is really great to see, because the team is guiding that, and I'm there to facilitate that conversation on behalf of them.
Perfect, thank you. So John, how did you simulate breakout rooms on Teams? It's making things difficult for my educations on Teams and hard to do.
So there's I can take you individually through this. It takes about half an hour to actually demo it, but the very simple way to do this, and I can connect with the individuals afterwards if they want to sort of ping me an email, what have you, is in MS Teams you can create different channels, and you can run simultaneous meetings inside MS Teams as well. So for example, I'd create a channel called main training. I'll create breakout room 1, another channel, breakout 2 and 2, another channel, breakout room 3, another channel. So I'd have 3 or 4 channels all set up there. I'd run the main training in that kind of initial meeting room called main training room. And then what I would do after that is then ask people to join their own breakout rooms and run immediate meetings. I think they're called Meet Now meetings. So you can run these recordings. You can only ever be in one meeting at a time. So if you're in the main training room and then you go to the breakout room, your meeting will be on hold for the main training room. And when you finish that, you can then ping everybody in that room, ask them to come back out again. So it's a little bit more overhead than you'd have in Zoom. Zoom allows you to just press a button and push them all out into a room, and after a short period of time, pull them all back again. And it's one of the key features of MS Teams that they've been trying to resolve for quite some time. But this is a workaround that works quite well. And actually one of my clients that I'm running training on next week, they can't use this, as I mentioned in the talk. So we're using Teams because that's what they have internally. And we've demoed it with them on their side, and it worked really well. So create multiple channels. Then you can run a video channel, a video chat in each one of those channels, and you can move people in and out of them by asking them to move in and out. So you can join the channels, ask them to move out, send them notifications as well. So it's kind of quite a handy way to do it. But it's a little bit more cumbersome than Zoom, but it is workable, and it works to great effect, because one of the big things you don't want to have is the entire training to be everybody sat in one big room, all just staring at the trainer, because no one interacts then. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks, John. Another one for you.
Yeah.
This is slightly related as well. Are you setting up back channels in case people lose their connections?
Yeah, so we go back through and just make sure that everyone's kind of connected. We've got a little bit of check-ins all the time just to make sure that things are there. And we are looking at all these different kind of who's actually still connected to the meetings and to the murals and stuff. Because you've got quite regular breaks throughout the training, what we've found is that you've got an opportunity to do a quick sense check how many people are there, and ping individuals if you're finding that they're kind of disengaging quite a lot. So yeah, we tend to do that. And we also do a bit of a sense check. So what Dhaval was saying about a bit of a sync, a bit of a check-in at the beginning of the day. When everybody comes back, we're asking, after maybe 2 hours, we're doing check-ins just to see how people are feeling, fist to five, everyone okay, everyone all right, just those kind of things throughout the training, just to get a sense of where people are and if they're still engaged.
Thank you. Another one to you, John. How do you think your industry shifts in the future? Is everything going to be online, and are you not worried about theft of content?
No, not really. So there's two key questions there, I suppose. One of them is around whether I'm worried about the pivot into online and whether it's going to be there forever, I suppose. And then the second thing around IP. So I'll cover the first one off first. So I think that there is going to be a new normal, and I don't think things are going to go back to ever how it was before. Looking at how the industry is moving, looking at how organizations are moving away from even having office spaces themselves, potentially. It's so interesting to see that it needed a pandemic of global kind of impact to force, not a digital transformation, but force the working from home, force these kind of remote working things into organizations. It's quite interesting to see. I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were before. I'm not worried about it because we can pivot into that and we can support that. We do a lot of consulting and coaching. That can often be done remotely. We've been working with the UK government for quite some time, and a lot of their coaching sessions are remote one-on-one coaching sessions to save on travel. And so that's actually something that I think is going to keep on growing. I think one important thing to sort of take into account is that you still need to be able to spend the time building and facilitating the tools that you need to do for these things. And if you don't do that, then your presentations, your work that you do, the kind of coaching you do and the training will be subpar. So I think that when you look at on-demand training, there could be an opportunity for theft there, I suppose, and IP change. But if it's on-demand training of you speaking at the camera, I mean, it's difficult for them to then pass that off as their own, really. But the content could be shared and could be changed. If it's you facilitating your own kind of work and your own training, what we've often found is that because the actual workshops are transient, the mural boards are set up for that class. Once that class is finished, that mural board gets wiped and started again as a new template. There is nothing for them to really steal and take away. You've got the expertise of the trainer, the experience of the trainer, and certification from that. You can't really take that. I think what I will see as a challenge, though, from as a different angle, is there will potentially be a race to the bottom for pricing. As the global market opens up for these kind of trainings, we need to be really conscious about what the value is against that for what happens for when the big shops open up their doors and allow for huge amounts of training for very cheap opportunities there. And that's where it's going to make a real big interesting pivot for organizations to make sure that the value that they deliver is important and is seen rather than just a price point. So I think that's one of the challenges we're going to see is about pricing and about value delivery. I don't think the IP and stuff of remote facilitated training is going to be something that our business is going to be worried too much about, because the stuff we do is all very personal from our kind of experience.
Thank you.
No worries.
Dhaval, how do you get people to embed the mindset you describe if they haven't done it before? How do you get negative personalities on side?
Yeah, that makes me smile. I think there's a couple of things you can bring to bear, which is persistence, patience, and perseverance. So not everyone is necessarily going to be au fait with this way of working. In fact, if you've come from a very different background, this can be quite clashing and quite conflicting in nature. And one of the things I have adapted in terms of my style is meeting people more where they are around this. So I think this is a key coaching concept per se in general, especially if you come from a professional coaching background and apply and look through things from that lens. It's really recognizing that we all have a different perspective of what the right thing to do is, and we all may have a different way of doing it. And if you come in and tell people and dictate how to do things, there is the strong potential to have quite a visceral response. No one likes to be told that they're wrong, or the way they're doing things is wrong. But you can often influence and guide a conversation in a positive direction through really being present, either with that individual or that team or collection of individuals, and working things through them. I think if you can do that, and you can stay present, and you can really empathize with the other individual, it has paid enormous dividends, especially with the engagement I've been leading. It's not to say it isn't easy. It's not to say that it's not emotionally draining. So there have been numerous days when I've got to the end of the day, and I found that recently I've been working really long hours, so finish at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night hasn't been unusual, which has been a personal challenge. I have a young family. I've got a 3-year-old son, and trying to balance those needs, it's been really difficult. That being said, I really believe in what we're trying to do. I really care about the people I work with. I think that's a necessary sacrifice that I need to make in the current situation. And I make it on the premise that it won't always be like this. And also I create boundaries for my own my own personal circumstances. So I do make time for my family. I do make sure that whatever my wife, my son, my dog needs, I give to them as best I can. It's all balanced, and it's all stuff that you just constantly have to work through. I still don't have the magic bullet for this, unfortunately.
Thanks, Dhaval. Jon, can you talk more about facilitating virtual breakout activities during training?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of key things to sort of keep in mind here, a few key things to keep in mind. One thing that was quite surprising, although probably we should have expected it, is that things take a lot longer than you'd expect when you facilitate exercises and discussions online. Mainly because people are not, if you have the right etiquette in place and the right kind of tools in place, people aren't going to be talking over each other as much as they would be in person. There's not a lot of banter happening because people are waiting their turn to talk and how they kind of come across. So things do take a bit longer. So always add a bit more time for those technical teething problems, but also people taking time. Engagement is difficult to keep going. And I think the way that you do that is building variety in the delivery you have in the exercise that you do, and have as much done on the tables, if you like, in inverted commas, in the breakout rooms as possible. What you want to do as a facilitator, rather than just waiting in the main room, is dipping in and out of these breakout rooms to ensure that people are still able to connect to different things, they're still able to understand where they are, and to give people time checks of how long the sprint time boxes are for those particular kind of exercises. That's an important thing to try and continue building engagement. One of the things is about knowing your audience as well and their technical abilities, but also keeping those numbers relatively small. It's difficult to manage a much bigger room without a co-facilitator who are able to do it. If you have 5, 6 breakout rooms, you need somebody else really to help you kind of co-facilitate. And I've seen that happen before as well, where you've got somebody helping produce the actual training on the side and making sure everything's working, giving the time and there's freedom for the trainer to deliver the training. It depends on how you can work yourself, and it's important to know those things really. the breakout rooms themselves, use the technologies that are available. Zoom is really easy for these things. You can create random breakout rooms, but you can also create predetermined breakout rooms. So once you've actually set up teams, you can have them always go back to the same rooms so that they're always working in the same boards and they get to know each other and get that kind of connection that you need to have meaningful conversations. Some of the stuff that you want to have up front is still do those initial things you do in training, which is ensuring that people are aware of the working agreements of the group, and ensuring that, you know, if people are hogging the time, that everyone's got an opportunity to put the hand up and sort of close time out. There's opportunities there to run to time boxes to ensure that people have their say. Everyone's got their video cameras on, everyone's got their mics on, those kind of things to ensure that actually everyone manages to make those human connections as well. Because actually it's really easy to disconnect. You know, if I turn my mic off, I turn my camera off, I could go off and make a cup of tea, come back again, everyone else has done that project and they've got the learning. It's not really valuable, and actually it's not very helpful. So I think making sure those things are there is really important. The one thing I did say at the beginning as well was around making sure you have regular breaks. And I think people get more tired being hyper engaged in the training than online than they would do in a room. And it depends on people's different teaching styles and kind of learning styles as well. And I think it's important to be very cognizant of that and setting breaks every sort of 60 minutes or so, maybe earlier, 7 or 8 minutes, to try and give people enough time to break. Getting people to stretch, people to have a walk around or whatever. So building exercise, physical exercise to get people kind of doing it. So when you hit that kind of 3 o'clock nosedive, everyone's kind of getting very tired and very exhausted. You can sort of pep them up the same way you would do in the room. So take what you learn from your in-person facilitation and apply it online, but leverage the tools you have available. Short time boxes, know your audience and get to know the technologies, so that you can check those back channels, you can make sure everyone's working, and you're the person who can help them with their connectivity issues if they have them. Hopefully that answers the question, Naomi.
Thanks very much, John. And that is it for questions this week. So special thanks to Jon Spruce and Dhaval Shah. It's been great. We've got another one next Wednesday. So do sign in or sign up on our meetup page and get involved then. But that's enough, and that's everything from Agile London this week. Bye for now, guys.
Great stuff. Thank you, guys. It's been great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, John. Cheers, Dhaval.
No worries.